Hello, good evening. Please let's wait a little bit for others to join. I think we are still about 2 or 3 here. So let's wait for 2 or 3 minutes so others can join. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay, good evening. I was saying let's wait 2 or 3 minutes so others can join. You are all welcome. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good evening, Samuel. I think we have a lot of people in the house already. Delight, Emmanuel, Israel, Kesh, Mark, Oladipo, Patrick. So good evening, everyone. You're welcome. And then Pelumi, Aremu, Sarah. So as you all know, we are going to be commencing basics of CSS today. So in the last week, we've been talking about HTML, which is hypertext markup language. So you're welcome. Good evening. So today we are going to be progressing to CSS. That is how you can style your HTML web page using CSS. So I will be sharing my screen now. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? So as we all know, if you have a question, please is either you drop it in the chat box or raise a hand so I can attend to you when when we have time to answer questions. So at the same time, please let's all mute our microphone so as to enjoy the class smoothly. So you are all welcome once again. Okay, so talking about CSS, we all know CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets. So, and CSS is actually used to like control the layout of a web page. So with CSS, can format the layout of your HTML web page, can control the color, for example, the color, the font size, the size of the text, the font color, the font family, and also add space between elements and how some elements are positioned. So these are actually the works of HTML. Also, like adding background images, background colors. So this is what CSS is actually used to do. It is majorly used to style or format the layout of a web page. So without CSS, your web page will just be black and white, just like your HTML web page. it looks boring, no style, no formatting, just content. So HTML is just the structure, while CSS is used to like format the HTML web page. So we are going to progress into different ways of using CSS. How can we use CSS in our web page? How do we get started with CSS? Since we all understand how CSS is used now. So how can we use CSS? So I'll just start with my basic HTML. So CSS can't work on its own without your HTML documents. So that's why you learned HTML first. So this is a basic HTML code now. All right. So from there are different ways you can use CSS. CSS can be added to your HTML documents in 3 ways. So 3 ways, which are inline, internal, and the third one, which is external. So those are the 3 ways you can actually add CSS to your HTML documents. Those are the 3 ways. So we are going to start with inline. Inline is the basic one, followed by internal, followed by external. So external is the most commonly used type of CSS styling. But let's just have a basic idea of what's inline, of how inline and internal styling work. All right, so I'll just create a simple element now. We are not going to do more of HTML today. So just the basic HTML that we all understand. So don't forget we are starting with inline. Okay, let me just off this. All right, so we are starting with inline CSS. So under this, I just create a simple paragraph tag, and inside it, you can have a text like, this is a paragraph. So by now, I think we all understand how to use this in HTML. Okay, fine. So how do we style this paragraph now? If I open this in the browser, let's see how it looks in the browser. So this is looking like this currently in the browser. No styling, no changing of color or anything. So let's just try to format this text now using inline CSS. So inline CSS, as the name implies, is like a CSS that you write in the same line with your HTML elements. In the same line with your HTML elements, using what? Using the style attributes. So there's something we call the style attributes. So this style attributes is actually used to style elements internally, inline. So in line with your HTML element. All right, so from there now, let's just try to change the text color of this paragraph. So we can do that by saying, don't forget the first thing to do is by adding your style attributes. I'll go over that again. Adding your style attributes, you can see HTML is already bringing the styles that you can add to this paragraph, like the height, the width, the border, the background color, the color. So all these are styles. So let's just do basic styling, color. So after setting it to color, then you can then choose the type of color you really want. So let's say red for now. So right now, we've styled these elements inline. So, and immediately it will be reflected on the browser. Can you see that? So exactly that's how inline styling works. So that's our first styling today. Don't forget the format is just by adding your style attributes. Then after adding your style attributes, the next thing to do is to actually add your property and your value. So when I say property is just like, what do you want to change in this paragraph? What do you want to format? So if you want to format the background color, then this will be background color. But in this case, we want to change the color to red. So that's why the property is color and the value is now red. So the value varies as well. So the value can be purple. It can be purple. Let's see how that looks on the browser. You can see that. So that's what they call, that's what we call value. So the value can be black or white or any color you actually want to set it to. So that is a bit of inline styling. So let's just do one more inline style. So I'll just add an heading element. So don't forget again, we had style attributes. Style attributes, then choose a style here or hit enter. Then after that, you can see HTML is bringing this, VS Code is bringing all these options for you. So just choose any of these. So in this case, I'll try to edit the background color. So I'll choose background color, then we can then change our background color to any color we want. So I can decide, okay, let's say our background color is black. Or probably let's use red so as to make it legible. So this background color also is a property, while red is a value. Background color is the property you want to change, and red is the value. So when we check this on the browser now, we have this. So the background color that we just added is red. That's why you have this background to be red. So exactly that's how CSS inline style works. So before we proceed, I can see some people raising hands already. So I'll just check if you can take one or two questions before we move on. Okay, who is iPhone? Please unmute and speak.
Okay, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. Please, I only just have a suggestion because we raised the issue as well on Slack and nothing has been done to it. I just want them to take note of the time of the lecture because some of us are fasting. Then the time they used to fix the lecture like 8, 7, 4, most of the time we used to be at the mosque by that time. So it's always inconvenient for us to be having the lecture at that same time again. So I don't know, maybe there is any possibility, means of them try to adjust the time for us.
Okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. We'll look into that. There's no problem. Actually, we fixed it in the evening because some of us also have some other dedications in the morning and in the afternoon. So that's why we just shifted it to the evening. Okay, we consider that. Thank you. So any other question? All right, let's just continue for now. So from there, that's what inline CSS is used. That's how inline CSS is used. So from there, let's just move to internal CSS. We don't have much time. So internal CSS. Before I move on, I don't know if there's any question. Okay, there's no question about inline CSS for now. So that's the syntax to style your elements inline. So from there, we move on to internal CSS. So internal CSS is just used to define a style for a single HTML page. We are defining a style for a single HTML page. And your internal CSS is defined in the head section. This head section, what is this too? So this head section, that's where we define the internal CSS. And we define internal CSS using the style elements. So there's also an element called style. I don't know if you've come across that. In HTML, style. So this style, inside this, we can then have our styling. So that's what we call internal CSS. So internal CSS is defined in the head section. Note, this style element is not to be used anywhere apart from the head section. So internal CSS is defined in the head section within this style element right here. Within the style element. So from there now, we're going to have an example on how to style your elements internally as well. So let's just create another element, right? So I'll comment this out, and under it, you can create another element, or let's just copy this and edit. So I'll remove this. All right, so this is the H1, and we want to style it internally right now using internal CSS. So our style is going to be defined in this style element. So first, before we move on to that, there's something we call CSS selectors. CSS selectors. So these CSS selectors are just used to like call a particular HTML element from the HTML document and give it a specific styling. So right now, we are not using any CSS selector here because this is inline CSS, and inline CSS is very straightforward. That is, the CSS is attached to this paragraph elements only. But right now that we are using internal styling, we have to call the exact elements that we want to style from this body to the head. So let's try to do one so you can understand what I'm talking about. So this H1 and is an HTML element. So to style this, I can come to my style tag. Then let me try to make this closer. I'll just bring this down. All right. So inside this style tag now, because this element is named H1, so I can then start with H1, then note this CSS syntax. So after this H1, then I'll open a curly brackets, then enter. So inside this curly brackets, you can then have your property and value. This is also very simple and straightforward. So your property can then be like color red. So there are different CSS properties that you can use, but I'm just trying to use this for now because right now in this session, I just wanted to get the syntax of writing CSS, basically, not really the CSS properties because we have a lot of CSS properties. So just try to get the syntax of styling. So H1, why are we using H1? Because the element that we want to style is H1. So we are calling that H1, we are selecting that H1 and bringing it to the internal style elements, then giving it a color of red. Giving it a color of red. So I will just comment this out for now since we are not on inline anymore. So H1, then open your curly brackets, and after, inside the curly brackets, then you have color red. So let's see if that works. You can see that now. So we have our color of red. So basically that's how internal styling works. So as we have a paragraph tag, paragraph elements, and want to style it internally. So it is the same process. So we have to style this. Then after this H1, since this one is not H1 anymore, since the paragraph element is not H1, so after the H1, after the curly brackets, then you can then select your P tag. So the P, then open your curly brackets again. So inside these curly brackets, enter. So after the enter, then define your style. So another style that we can define is text align center. So don't worry about this for now. So text align center is just used to align your text in the center horizontally. So, but what I want you to get is how to select this paragraph tag and style it in your style element. So we are selecting this right now using the element name, which is P, and then we are bringing the P here, P tag, P, so then giving it a CSS property, text align center. So you can see that's right here. Our text is now aligned in the center. So that's the work of CSS. It's used to like format the layout of web pages. So the text is now in the center. Why? Because we gave it the styling named text align center. So that's just a way of selecting your HTML elements. Don't forget, I'm still talking about CSS selector. We are trying to select one HTML element, then style it in the style tag. Style it internally using the style tag. All right. So that's one way of selecting your HTML elements. So we are going to move to other ways. There are different ways of selecting HTML elements. I'm going to list them out now. So basically, yeah, under CSS selectors, we have different selectors. We are not going to be treating all in this session. So we have the simple selectors. The simple selectors like name, ID, and class. So those ones are simple selectors, and we've just used one of these now, which is the name. So this name is just like the element's name, and we've used it right now, which is H1. Then we brought the name here. So that's part of the simple selectors. So another one is ID, class. So we are going to talk about ID and class today. So we also have combinator selectors. We have combinator selectors, and also we have pseudo class selectors, and also we have pseudo element selectors as well. Pseudo elements. So this will just be elements, and we also have attribute selectors. So as I've said earlier, I'm not going to be talking about all these today. So in this class, don't forget this is just a basic CSS class. We are going to be talking about simple selectors. So all these can be treated later this week, probably in more core concepts of CSS. So don't worry about this for now. Let's just focus on simple selectors like name, ID, and class. So as I said earlier, we've used the name, and I'm sure that's clear now. That is H1, which is the name of these elements, calling out the element using his name. And the second one, paragraph tag using the P. P is the name of the element. So that's one of the selectors that we know as simple selectors. So let's move to the next one, which is actually ID. So how do we use ID selectors? So the ID selector uses the ID attributes of the HTML elements to select a specific content. To select a specific content. So don't forget what an attribute is. Attribute is always in the opening tag of every element. So in this now, okay, please, before I move on, let me look at the chat if there's any question. If there's any question, please raise your hand now. Okay. Okay, Adama, you can go first.
Okay, thank you. For the styling of the internal styling, you put H1 as the is it the element you are calling? I don't know. So that H1, if
Yes.
you have other H1 as headings in the same page, in the body, you have more than one H1. Won't this same thing apply to all H1? If you want it in a situation whereby you want it to apply to a particular header 1 element and leave others, how will you go about it? That is one question. And then number 2, if you have H1 and you also have H3 or H2, and you also want the same styling to apply to the same elements of H1 and H3, how also do you go about it? Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much for that question. That's a good question, actually. So what it means is that if you have plenty H1 on this page now, in these HTML documents, and you don't want all of them to have color red, how do you specify the exact styling for each H1? So that's when ID and class comes in. So don't forget, I was trying to explain in ID that is a unique identifier. So this H1 that we just called here now, assuming we have plenty H1, let's say, let me duplicate this. Okay, let's say we have about 7 or 6 H1 here now, and we don't want all of them to be red, because if you check the browser now, everything will be color red. Probably we just want only this one to be red, and we don't want others. But right now, the H1 is affecting everything. Why? Because we are using the name selector. So what we can do in that scenario is to use the ID selector. So that name selector is just like saying every H1 element on this HTML document should have color red. But if you give every H1 element a unique identifier, which is ID, then you can then call the ID, okay, HTML elements with the ID of 1, okay, come out, have a color of red. HTML elements with the ID of 2, come out and have a color of blue. So you can then specify the exact style you want for them. So I'm coming there using ID selector. So ID is a unique identifier, and it is actually what can solve what it's trying to say. So, and then the second question, so I'm coming there. Let's just try to answer Mkesh. Please go ahead. Mkesh, are you there? Please, who is doing this whiteboard stuff? How do we clean this? Mkesh, please, you can speak. And if you're not there, Olatunde, please, can go ahead.
All right. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes. My question is, you're talking of, just mentioned about the ID and class. You mentioned their function that, okay, it can be used to separate different, maybe we have different each ones. You can use to separate particular each one from another, something like that. Yeah, so I wanted to ask that. My question is, what's now the difference between the ID? Why do we know when to use ID, when to use class? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Yes, I'm still coming there. We know the difference between ID and class now. We all know they are used to specify styles for elements, but we will know the difference between them now. So Mkesh, Samuel, Aremu, please stop drawing those lines on the screen. Thank you.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Steven.
Good evening, ma.
Yes, thank you very much. My question is this about that inline styling.
Yes.
Is it applicable to just color or background color anything? Or we can do all sort of styling in that inline?
Okay. A very good question also. So you can do every sort of styling in this inline. So, but most times we don't use inline style. Why? Because by the time you start having 100 styles, you start having 50 styles, your HTML document will be growing bigger, bigger, bigger. So everything might actually be rough and not clean anymore. So that's why we either use, most times we either use internal styling or external styling that we are going to discuss very soon. So external is just like creating a different CSS file and moving all our CSS code into that file. But if we continue to write all our code in this inline style right here, you can see this is not clean anymore. So compare this type of style, which is internal style, compare it to this inline. Can see, obviously this is better because even visually it is more appealing. So internal styling or external styling is what we are going to be using majorly. So inline styling is just for few numbers of styles, but basically you can write any type of style you want inside this internal styling. As far as you are okay with it, you can write any type of style. So they all work same way, but not very advisable to use this inline styling. So I think that's clear now.
I have another question, sir. Can I combine two styling together, internal and inline, or external and inline? Can it be combined together?
Of course, they can be combined together. We are coming there actually. They can be combined together. Okay. So
All right, thank you, sir.
yes, you're welcome. Olasunde, do you still have something to say? Okay. I think that's the hand from the other one. All right. So from there now, you've seen some questions about classes and ID. What's the difference? Fortune or Fortune, please, you can unmute and speak.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, good
Hello,
evening.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, I have a question. I just came on the call not quite long. So my question is, I'm seeing on the top there, I'm seeing index HTML. I thought the HTML Slack is supposed to be like just HTML codes, and the CSS is supposed to be like something like main CSS or something like that. But you're talking about CSS in where they're supposed to put HTML code. So I don't know if I missed something. So I wanted to be clear on it.
Obviously, you missed something. Thank you. So
Okay.
we were talking about 3 types of CSS before you came in. So we have the inline, internal, and external. So we are going to start using the external soon, whereby we'll be creating a different CSS file. So, but right now we are doing inline and internal styling. So they are going to be inside your HTML documents. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, sorry, one more question. So if like
Okay.
for instance you're doing maybe you're trying to create something and you maybe generate a code from let's say ChatGPT, and how do you differentiate the internal? Is it okay, you're supposed to, you will see where they write it or something. How do you differentiate the internal from the external? Because something happened to me. I think I put some code. I was trying to, practice. So I generated some codes with ChatGPT and I put all the codes on CSS I want. I didn't know whether it was internal or external, but it wasn't giving me the result I wanted. So could that be the reason?
Oh, obviously, because you don't understand how internal and external is used. When you see this style tag now, if you copy it in an external CSS file, it won't work.
Oh,
If you copy it with this style tag like this style tag, and you
yeah.
paste it in an external CSS file, it won't work. So we are coming there actually.
Okay, thank
So
you very much.
yes, you're welcome. So let's just proceed for now. So ID and class. As I've said earlier, ID is an unique identifier that is used to select a specific HTML element. So the ID of an element must be unique within a page. That is, must use it to select one unique element. So how do we add ID to an element? It's an attribute, don't forget. So inside this opening tag, go by ID, then enter. ID, then enter. So that's how you create your ID. So inside this ID now, you can give it any name that you want. So you can give it any name that you want. So you can say heading 1 or head 1. Let's just shorten it like that. So this is head 1, and it is the ID name of this heading element. So that's ID for you. So when you want to style this now, how do we style this? How do we call these elements using the ID element, using the ID name, which is head1? So the first thing is to probably copy this head1, or you can type it out if you want. So then come here. So to select these elements with an ID of head1, we are going to start with this hash character, the hash character right here, which is shift 3. So this hash character, then followed by the ID name. Followed by the what? Followed by the ID name of that element, which is head1. Don't forget, we just created head1. But that's not complete because you can see our code is showing yellow right now. So we are not done. So from there, you can then open your curly brackets, then enter your style, then enter your what? Style. So let's just copy this and paste. So I'll change the color. Okay. So then enter your style. So I hope you understand what I've just done here. So basically, we added an ID element, an ID name called head1. So in this head1, to select it in your CSS style tag, you have to start with this hashtag. Then after the hashtag, you add the ID name of that element. Then inside it, your normal CSS selector, your normal CSS property and value. So if you check this in the browser now, the color will be blue. So with this ID now, we have conquered the problem of having several head1 elements. Heading1 elements. So come in, please. Okay, so if you have several heading1 elements now, it won't affect everything because we have given the first one a specific ID, and the ID is going to work for that specific heading. So I'm going to comment out this one because this is also affected. Let's comment out this one for now and check the results. Oh, where's the one we just did? Okay, I'm coming. Let's just comment out some of the stuff we worked on.
That was the blue one.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the blue one. My screen is on IK, so I didn't see. The blue is not very obvious. Okay, so this is the blue one right here now. And others are what? Others are black. Why? Because we gave this a specific ID, and we are styling that specific ID, not every H1 element anymore. So that's how to solve that problem of using. So that's the major disadvantage of using the name selector, because that name selector is not very effective when you have plenty heading1 elements. But by using this ID selector, you'll be able to specify the exact element, the specific element you want to give this color of blue to. So that's how ID work. So don't forget, the only tricky part here is just by adding your hashtag. So when you want to select elements using ID, you must start with hashtag in your CSS code. Start with hashtag. So from there now, we move on to the class selector. So the class selector is also very similar to the ID selector. So I'm going to remove all this. So the class selector is also very similar to the ID selector. So it's used to like select HTML elements with a specific class attributes. So class attributes, you can give the class attributes right here, enter. So in this class attributes, then you can give it a name. So you can say para one, as in paragraph 1. So we've added the class name right now. So to select this in the CSS code now, we start with the period character. This is the period. Another way you can say the full stop. So it is called the period character. So this period character now, followed by the name of the class. Followed by the name of the class, which is what? Para 1. I mean this name of the class right here. So which is para 1. And after that, you can open your curly brackets, then give it your desired style. Give it a desired style. So that's the difference between a class and ID selector. ID will start with the hashtag, while the class selector will start with the period character, the full stop. So then followed by the class name, then the curly brackets, and then lastly the period and the property and value. So we have been giving it one property and value since. To separate this from other properties, you can actually put another property under this, saying text align. So you can say center. So it's not compulsory you have only one styling for each element. So you can have many styling for each element. So that's why we have this semicolon here. So this semicolon is just used to like separate each property and value. I mean, to separate this from this. So it's always good to write your CSS code in this format. After one line, enter to make your code clean. So, and that's why we are using, although if you don't put this semicolon, it will be throwing an error like this. You can see that it will be throwing an error. So we have to separate it using the semicolon. So let's see how this para 1 looks like now. So I'll just comment this out. This might be affecting it. Okay, the color is only the color. Okay, so let's check it out now. So I think this is it here. So you can see it now has a background of, what background did it give it? I think chocolate or something. Exactly. So that's how class attributes works. Class selectors. ID. So right now you've talked about name selector using the H1 element. I mean using the name of the element, and followed by the ID selector using the name of the ID attributes, giving it ID attributes, then specifying the name, then in your CSS code, starting with the hashtag, followed by the ID name, then your style. So very similar to the class as well, giving it a class attribute, then a name. Then when you want to style it, you start with the period character, then followed by the name, and then your style. So that's how ID and class work. So someone asked the other time that what's the difference between name and the ID selector and the class selector. So the ID of an element is actually very unique within a page. So when I say unique, if you give this H1 ID of ed1, you can't give another H1 ed1 again. Let's assume we have another H1. or you have another element generally, and you want to give it ID of ed1, it's not very advisable to do it that way. So this ID is a very strict one here, very unique to a specific element. So you can't use more than one ID for 20 elements. But class can be used to group elements. And I say group elements, you can have another paragraph tag with a class of para1. You can have another h1 with a class of para1. So that's the difference between ID and class. So you can actually use a class selector to group many elements, as many elements as you want, but your ID must be unique to every specific element. So that's that about the name selector, the ID selector, and the class selector. So those are the basic selectors out of about 5 different type of selectors that we have. So any question at this point? Okay.
I have a question, but it's not
Yes.
about the way the ID is selected. When you went live on your browser, I noticed that the p tag containing the para1 class, it was centered on your browser. I'm not sending CSS code to center it.
Okay. So that's because we already set this P to say text align center.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see that. I've seen it now.
Yeah, exactly. So this P is still affecting it. That means you can use the two together. So sometimes you might be looking for how that is actually happening. I mean, how is the text aligned to the center? Forgetting that you have set the name selector to text align center. So the two
I
can
think
work together at the
my
same time.
network broke at one point. I didn't see when you added that.
Okay. So
sorry, I don't want to
yes.
go. I have one more thing to say, sir.
Okay.
It's about this text aligned center. I was trying to do something on the side by myself. I noticed that what's the difference between text align center and justify content center, I think.
Okay. Thank you for that. Well, basically, this is still outside of this class scope.
Okay,
so
let's continue with
exactly. So we talk about that in others more advanced CSS class. So okay. So I think someone is actually saying in the chat that we shouldn't take questions so that you can advance faster. Okay, but at least I need to know if you are all getting me. So that's that about internal styling and simple selectors in CSS. So before our time runs out, let's just look at how we can then do external styling. So external styling is very similar to your internal styling, the same syntax, the same way of selecting HTML elements, but let's look at the difference. So to write your external CSS style, as you all know, we are going to create your CSS file. So you can name it anything.css. So here we can name it styles.css because in it we are going to be having our styles. Then I think that was simple to create. You create a new file called styles.css or anything.css. So in your HTML, we have to link this HTML to the CSS file that we just created. So we want the two to work together. So we have to link them together using the link elements. So there's an element in HTML called the link element. You can see there's an option for CSS right here. So you choose the CSS, then you can actually specify by default, it is telling you, okay, style.css is another CSS file in this folder. But if you have another CSS file with, for example, now mine is styles.css, but VS Code is giving me style.css. So what you do in this scenario is to like remove it, then start with /, then choose your file. So / is just used when you want to specify a path to a file. So it will bring out all the files and folders in that directory. So style.css, then you choose this. So I think this is clear. So link element is always in your head tag, in your head section of your HTML. So don't put link elements in your body. I mean, in the body elements or in the body section. So link elements is always meant to be probably under your title or basically in your head section. So styles.css. So that's how to create it. Don't forget the process again. Link, then you choose CSS, then right here you can edit it to your CSS file, /, then choose your CSS file. So right now, the HTML is linked to the CSS file. So we can then start writing the CSS code. So I will just bring the CSS to the side here. If that's okay. All right, so as I've said earlier, we are not going to take too much time on external styling. So external styling is very similar to your internal styling. So the only difference here is that we are not using the style elements anymore in your external styling. This style element is for HTML. So in the external styling, you just go ahead straight to styling your elements. So H1, then your H1 color. So that's how you style externally, as simple as ABC. So you can have another one, probably your P tag, then you style it. So that's that about external styling. It's very similar to internal. The only difference is that it is not using the style elements. Don't forget that there's no style elements. So right now, you can also select elements from this HTML document and style it in your external file. So let's just do one final example before we take questions for the day. So okay, let's create H1, or no, let's create H3 and style it using external CSS so that you can have an idea. So in this case, I'll be using class selector. So I'll give it a class of ed6. So to style this in my external CSS now, then I can do something like the period character, which is the full stop, then followed by the name of the class. This is ed6, the name of the class, then followed by your curly braces, then your style inside it. So followed by your style inside it. So can have a background color. Okay, so let's see if that works now. So this is the last elements this is the final elements we just did here now, heading 6. You can see it's working fine, just like the other elements. It's working fine. The heading 6 is also having that background that we set in the external CSS. So some of us might be asking that, okay, what if I have heading 6 to have a color of red here, and I also style it internally. Heading 6, let's come here and give it another style. So I have a background color of black. So I'm sure that kind of question is still coming. So before it comes in, let me just take care of it. So let's say in internal styling, in your internal style, you have your heading 6 you have the background color of heading 6 to be black. But in external file, you have the background color of heading 6 to be red. So which one will actually work for the elements? Is the element going to have a background of black or a background of red, since it is the same style? So I don't know if anyone can answer that before we move on. In the chat, please. In the chat. What's going to be the final background color of this NE6? Assuming that we have styled it here to have a background color of black, and we also style it externally to have a background color of red. Which do you think will take effect on it? Okay, I can see black, I can see red. Okay. Okay, red, black, red. Okay. All right. Thanks for all the answer. It shows that you're actually following. But the answer is black. The answer is basically black. So internal styling is closer to these elements than external styling. So this is just like the specificity of internal styling is higher than the external style. So the external style will take a long time to work. So that's why this internal style will actually take effect. So let's just see for ourselves before we proceed. Can you see that? So the background is actually black. Wow. Because we have the style tag, the internal styling closer to these elements. So the specificity of this style is going to be higher. This internal style is going to be higher than this external styling. So how about if we have this internal styles with background color of black, and we have inline style to have a background color of, let's say, purple. So which do you think will now take effect on the elements? Let's just choose purple. So I'm expecting answers for that too. Purple. Exactly. So you're just getting that now. So the inline styling is also having higher specificity on the elements than the internal. So they are just in stages. Inline is the most specific one, followed by your internal, then followed by your external. So anytime you have the same styles for these three types of CSS, the inline will always work over the others. So that's what I just want to clarify before we start taking probably 2 or 3 questions. All right. So thanks for all the answers in the comment section. So any question before we actually call this, is it a day or a night? Any question?
I have a question. Let's
Okay,
assume you give H1 a class. Let's assume give the same elements a class and an ID. If you use an ID to style differently, use from the class, use an ID to style maybe color of red, use the class to style it color of blue. Which one is this?
Please be more audible, sir.
Okay,
Let's
let me just explain what
yes.
it's trying to say. Let me explain. I understand you. I can hear you. So it's trying to say what if you have, and after this class, you have an ID for this element, these same elements. Let's say, yes, you can call it, what should you call it? You can call it the same name too. So then we are styling it here, saying, let me just remove this so that this won't affect it. Or let's try to change the color. So we are styling this now, saying color red. Then we are styling it again using the hashtag heading 6 and saying color blue. So which one will work out of the class and ID? So can anyone answer that in the comment section before we check it out also? Which do you think will work in the class and ID? Class and ID, which will work? Okay. Class, ID. So ID is more. So don't forget, we said ID is a unique, ID is more specific. So I believe ID should take predominance in this aspect. So let's see if that's ID. Yeah, this is right. So the color is, the background color is still affecting. Let's remove the background color so we can see it clearly. So as you can see, the ID is actually working. So everyone that says ID is correct. So ID is more unique than class. That was what I was talking about the other time. So thank you for that question. So time is up actually. So Catherine, can you ask your question?
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Please, just for the last time, so that I will not confuse my head. Just a quick summary of the inline styling and internal styling. It's confusing me a lot. Just do a summary of it and just have it again.
Okay, sure, I will do that. I will do that before we round up this class. So, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, I think that's that for now. So now she's saying I should just do a quick summary about on inline and internal along with external. So inline is just like adding your style attributes to your elements in the same line. So that's why it is called inline, because they are on the same line. So adding the style attributes to your elements. So then from there, we moved on to the internal styling. So to create your internal style, you have to create these style elements, then add it to your edge section. You can see it's inside this edge section. So then styling it with your CSS selectors. So if you understand CSS selectors, you will understand that, okay, we can select it by name, we can select it by ID or by class. By name is by using the element's name, paragraph tag. By ID is by starting with your hashtag, then followed by the ID name. And by class is by starting with your period character, then followed by the class name. So those are the different way you can select your CSS when you're styling internally or externally. So, but if it is inline, you don't need to use any CSS selector because the inline already understand that, okay, what are they styling? The elements that has the attribute of style. So from there, we moved on to the external styling. So to style your elements externally, I said that you are going to create a new CSS file. So after this new CSS file, we need to link it to the HTML file that we are working with. Then by linking it, we create a link tag, then specify the path to that CSS file in this href. So after that, it is exactly the same way you write your internal code, just that it doesn't have the style elements around it. Doesn't have the style elements around it. So I think that's clear for now. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining this class. And I hope we've all gained something today. So I don't know if you have watched any content on CSS yet on your elements, but at least this is a way to start. So you can always research more on CSS. So you'll be having more classes on CSS this week, both advanced and probably another basic class with me on CSS. So till then, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of the night actually. So bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.